You need to watch this if you crave chills down your spine. Welcome to Soul Studios. Here, true crime meets the unknown. Suspense lurks in every shadow, and supernatural forces whisper from the dark. We craft chilling, edge-of-your-seat short stories inspired by the eerie, the unexplained, and the most haunting mysteries. 3 new stories drop every week, each one darker than the last. Are you ready to step inside? Subscribe now before the next story finds you.
In a quiet southern town, a beloved banker vanishes without a trace, leaving behind a mystery that rattles the entire community. As investigators dig deeper, they uncover a tangled web of deception, a picture-perfect marriage, a hidden affair, and financial secrets worth millions. What begins as a routine missing persons case quickly spirals into something far more sinister. This immersive true crime narrative puts you in the detective's shoes, following the trail of clues, lies, and betrayal that slowly reveal the chilling truth behind a polished facade. If you love gripping true crime stories with real-feel tension, emotional depth, and shocking revelations, subscribe to Soul Studios. Every week, we bring you haunting narratives that dig deep and stay with you long after the final twist. I remember the cold bite of the November air as I approached the dark SUV abandoned at the edge of a storage lot. The headlights had been left on, casting eerie shadows across the gravel. A faint smell of gasoline and damp leaves hung in the silence. Pushing the door open, my flashlight beam landed on the motionless form of a woman slumped across the back seat. My heart pounded. This was Tracy Carter, the 44-year-old local bank executive who had been reported missing just 2 days before. Her body was partially undressed, and her wrists were loosely bound with duct tape, yet expensive jewelry, a gold necklace and rings remained untouched on her. It was a jarring tableau that immediately told me something was very wrong. This was no random robbery gone bad. It felt staged, deliberate. I inhaled slowly, steeling myself for the investigation to come, already sensing that the truth behind this scene would shake our peaceful community to its core. Tracy Carter was well known in our southern town, a respected banker, devoted mother, and the kind of person who lit up every room. In the 20 years since she'd moved here, she had climbed from a bank teller to a vice president of a local financial institution, admired for her work ethic and warmth. Her husband, Jason Carter, was equally well regarded on the surface, a charismatic insurance consultant who ran his own small investment business. They appeared to be a power couple living the good life. From the outside, the Carters had it all: a nice home in an upscale neighborhood, luxury cars, and active involvement in the community. They often hosted cookouts and even volunteered at church events. Few knew that it was Tracy's family connections that helped Jason start his business years ago. Her father had mentored him in the insurance trade and set him up with his first client accounts. Tracy was the proud wife, eager to see Jason succeed just as she had. Behind closed doors, however, cracks were forming in the Carters' perfect facade. Friends later told me that Jason and Tracy loved the high life a bit too much. The couple frequently took weekend trips to casinos along the Gulf Coast, where Jason was known as a high roller. In fact, he had achieved an exclusive 7-star VIP gambler status, a level requiring roughly $1 million in play at the casinos. Their indulgences didn't stop at gambling. Jason collected flashy cars, including a classic muscle car he kept at a private garage. Money was flowing out as fast as it came in, and unbeknownst to most, the Carters were drowning in debt. Still, Tracy remained upbeat, even excitedly telling friends about a dream house they planned to buy. No one could imagine the storm that was brewing. Financial strain, secrets, and betrayal were about to culminate in a tragedy. In those early days, I began to piece together who Tracy was and who might have wanted to harm her. I spoke with her brother and her closest friend to learn more. They described Tracy as loyal, ambitious, and kind-hearted, someone who believed in lifting others up. She had stood by Jason through all his ups and downs, but as I gently probed about the Carters' marriage, uneasy glances were exchanged. There were things. One friend confided to me that Tracy wouldn't discuss openly. Rumors, whispers really, of Jason's indiscretions and mounting financial troubles. At the time, it was just background noise, nothing concrete, but it planted the first seeds of suspicion in my mind. The investigation into Tracy's death unfolded with methodical urgency. As the lead detective, I documented the crime scene in that storage lot meticulously. There were immediate red flags. Despite the victim's hands being bound, there were no obvious signs of struggle inside the SUV. In fact, Tracy's shoes had been removed and placed neatly side by side on the driver's floor, which struck me as odd. Why would an attacker take the time to arrange the victim's sandals? It felt staged, as if someone wanted us to believe a false sequence of events. Later, the coroner's report confirmed my suspicions. Tracy had been killed by asphyxiation approximately 48 hours before her body was found. Bruises around her neck indicated she had been gripped or garroted, and several of her fingernails were broken, suggesting she fought ferociously for her life. The lack of disturbance in the car led us to conclude that she hadn't been killed there. Tracy was murdered somewhere else and then transported to the lot, her SUV left as a tomb to mislead us. The timeline was crucial. We learned that on the day she vanished, Tracy had planned to go shopping for her upcoming anniversary. Store security footage never captured her that day. She never made it to any shops. This meant she was likely killed at home or shortly after leaving home, not long after I suspect she last spoke to her husband. Jason's account of that day was foggy. He claimed that he and Tracy had breakfast together, and then she went out on errands and simply never returned. Something about Jason's demeanor unsettled me. He was anxious, shifting stories, and at one point mentioned something bizarre. Tracy and I always agreed we'd never embarrass each other, he blurted out during our first interview. It was an odd thing to say about a missing wife and struck me as a defensive remark. As investigators, we learned to trust our gut, and mine was telling me to look harder at Jason. Standard procedure meant starting with those closest to the victim, so Jason was certainly on our radar. But we kept an open mind. We combed through Tracy's phone records, emails, and work correspondence, looking for any sign of conflict or threats. What we found instead were subtle hints of marital discord. One email from Tracy to a friend mentioned feeling lonely in her marriage. Another note on her calendar showed a cancelled couples therapy session. We also discovered that Jason had taken out a hefty life insurance policy on Tracy the previous year, a $500,000 policy, which immediately raised eyebrows. Could this homicide be financially motivated? A few days into the investigation, the first big lead emerged. Tracy's brother approached me with a troubled expression and a file of papers. He hesitated, clearly upset, but then divulged that he suspected Jason had been unfaithful for years. According to her brother, Tracy had confided some months back that she found suspicious charges on their credit card bills, lavish hotel stays, jewelry she never received, and she feared her husband was having an affair. Armed with this information, I tracked down the name that had surfaced. Bethany Beth Collins, a 37-year-old acquaintance who attended the same church as the Carters. Beth was married and active in the community, which perhaps is why Tracy had been reluctant to accuse her without proof. When we brought Beth in for an interview, her husband seated beside her, she initially played the role of a casual family friend, but confronted gently with inconsistencies and the fact that others had seen her and Jason together, Bethany's facade crumbled. Tears in her eyes, she admitted she and Jason had been meeting in secret 2 or 3 times a week for over a year. It was an affair long hidden under the guise of church gatherings and neighborhood barbecues. The revelation of this love triangle flipped the case on its head. Suddenly, we had 2 potential suspects. A betrayed wife could be killed by a jealous mistress, or a cheating husband could murder his wife to be with his lover, and perhaps to keep his wallet intact. Bethany's husband provided an alibi for her on the day Tracy disappeared, and nothing placed Beth at any crime scene. In fact, Bethany appeared genuinely fearful as she spoke. Jason was getting more volatile lately, she confessed quietly. She claimed she tried to break off the affair after Tracy's death, which she swore she knew nothing about, but Jason hounded her relentlessly in the following weeks. This only made my alarm bells ring louder about Jason. Bethany even agreed to wear a wire during a meeting with him, hoping he might incriminate himself. It was a desperate gambit, and it failed. In the recorded conversation, Jason stayed eerily calm. "I'd never do something like that," he said when Beth pressed him about Tracy's death, his tone almost rehearsed. We didn't get a confession, but his nonchalant denial only deepened my resolve to get to the truth. Weeks turned into months as we gathered evidence. Forensic analysis of the SUV yielded frustratingly little. Whoever moved Tracy's body had been careful. No fingerprints, no DNA that didn't belong. It seemed professionally cleaned, or at least wiped down, except for the tragic evidence of Tracy's own struggle. We executed search warrants on the Carter home and Jason's office, looking for any signs of a fight or planning. No obvious bloodstains or hair fibers turned up. Still, small details nagged at me. A faint chemical odor in their garage, as if someone had scrubbed the floor with bleach, and Jason's peculiar lack of emotional display. He appeared at his wife's funeral with red-rimmed eyes, yet gave a eulogy so devoid of genuine affection that even attendees whispered how strangely composed he was. By the 4th month, the case was growing cold. Pressure was mounting on me and my team as Tracy's family pleaded for answers. I found myself awake at 3 a.m. many nights, replaying every clue. What were we missing? The affair established motive for Jason, but motive isn't proof. We needed concrete evidence linking him to the murder. Little did I know a financial puzzle piece was about to drop into our laps and blow the whole case wide open. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Carrie Barnes, one of Tracy's closest friends and also a client of Jason's investment business, walked into the station one afternoon with a stack of papers and a look of anger and betrayal. Carrie explained that shortly before Tracy's death, she had asked Jason to cash out an annuity worth tens of thousands of dollars, money she needed to pay off some debts. Jason had oddly discouraged her, but eventually he agreed to transfer the funds. When the money arrived in her account, something didn't add up. The transfer didn't come from the insurance company as it should have. It came directly from the Carter's personal bank account. "This is fraud," her banker friend had told her bluntly when examining the documents. Carrie realized that Jason must have secretly liquidated one of his own accounts to pay her, likely because the annuity itself had never been invested as promised. In other words, Jason was running a financial scam. As I absorbed this information, a shiver ran through me. We pulled records and soon uncovered the extent of it. Jason had been taking clients' money under the guise of investing, but was actually using new client funds to pay returns to earlier clients. The classic Ponzi scheme strategy. He was stealing from Peter to pay Paul, as one investigator put it. The successful business image Jason projected was a lie. In reality, he was juggling debt and deceit, and the walls were closing in. This explained the Carters' financial stress. It dawned on us that Tracy, with her banking acumen, might have discovered irregularities in their finances. Perhaps she found out about the missing money or the enormous debt, hundreds of thousands of dollars they'd accumulated, and confronted him. If so, Jason would have realized that exposure was imminent. He stood to lose his business, face jail for fraud, and lose Bethany as well if everything fell apart. The timing was sinisterly convenient. Tracy died just as they were about to close on her dream house, which surely would have involved financial scrutiny. Greed and fear had likely driven Jason to consider the unthinkable. Armed with evidence of Jason's fraudulent dealings, we finally had probable cause to arrest him, at least on financial crimes, and search more extensively. But when we went to execute the arrest warrant, Jason had vanished. It appeared that as our net tightened, he caught wind and went on the run. A warrant was issued in late March and a multi-state alert went out. For over 2 weeks, Jason managed to evade capture, and each day that passed, I worried justice might slip away. Tips trickled in. A man matching his description seen at a gas station off I-40, an abandoned rental car in Mississippi. It was an intense period of near misses and mounting tension. My team and I hardly slept as we coordinated with US Marshals and State Police. Finally, after a 17-day manhunt, we got him. Jason was found hiding out at a roadside motel about 80 miles from home in Jackson, Tennessee. He was alone, checking in under a false name, and had a stash of cash and several fake IDs on him, possibly ready to flee farther. The moment I slapped the cuffs on Jason Carter's wrists, an overwhelming mix of relief and anger washed over me. He stared at me blankly, perhaps realizing the game was truly up. In custody, Jason maintained a cocky silence, denying everything even as we laid out the evidence. The forensic accountants had traced his web of lies, the affair was exposed, and circumstantial evidence tied him to the timeline of Tracy's murder. One more chilling detail emerged as we prepared for trial. An inmate who briefly shared a jail cell with Jason came forward, willing to testify that Jason had privately admitted how he killed his wife. According to this informant, Jason bragged that he snuck up behind Tracy and suffocated her with a plastic bag, a detail that matched the autopsy's indication of asphyxiation. Hearing that made my blood run cold. Even after all these months, imagining Tracy's final moments was heart-wrenching. But it also steeled my resolve to ensure he would never walk free again. The climax of the case truly came in the courtroom. During the trial's most dramatic moment, prosecutors unveiled a piece of evidence we had almost overlooked. A neighbor of the Carters testified that his security camera, aimed partially at the street, captured something crucial on the day Tracy disappeared. Although the footage had since looped over, that neighbor recalled seeing only one vehicle leave the Carter residence that day, Tracy's black Chevrolet SUV. Hours later, he saw Jason return home in his vintage Chevelle sports car. Jason had never mentioned taking out his classic car that day. This testimony neatly corroborated our theory. Jason likely killed Tracy at home that morning, then transported her body in her Omi to dump it. He then walked to his nearby storage garage, conveniently just down the street from where the SUV was found, and drove back in his Chevelle, thinking no one would notice the vehicle swap. It was a calculated move to create an alibi gap and delay the discovery of her body. That neighbor's recollection, combined with all the other evidence, hit the jury hard. I watched Jason in that moment. A single bead of sweat rolled down his temple as his last lie unraveled. The resolution of the case came with the jury's verdict on a crisp fall day, nearly 4 years after Tracy's murder. Guilty on the charge of first-degree murder. Jason Carter, a man who once walked around as a successful businessman and charming husband, stood stone-faced as the judge pronounced a life sentence. In the gallery, Tracy's family quietly wept, a mix of sorrow and relief that justice had been served. I caught sight of her brother squeezing their mother's hand. In that simple gesture was the release of years of pent-up grief. As Jason was led away in handcuffs, Tracy's mother spoke in a trembling voice about the daughter she lost. "No sentence will bring Tracy back, but I pray you will repent for what you've done," she said, addressing her once son-in-law. Jason offered no apology, his eyes downcast and empty. In the months that followed the murder conviction, the truth about Jason's schemes continued to unfold. Federal prosecutors pursued the financial crimes, mail fraud, insurance fraud, money laundering, and Jason eventually struck a deal, pleading guilty to swindling over $1 million from trusting clients. The judge handed him an additional 7-year prison term for those offences, to be served after his life sentence. He also had to forfeit his collection of flashy cars and whatever remained of his assets, which were sold off to partially repay the victims of his Ponzi scheme. It was a small consolation to those financially devastated by his lies. Many of them, like Carrie Barnes, sat through the fraud hearings with grim satisfaction. "He stole our money and he stole Tracy's life," one said, a stark summary of the two-faced betrayal Jason had committed. Reflecting on this case, I often find myself struck by the convergence of greed, betrayal, and violence. Jason's downfall was ultimately of his own making. Had he not been driven by insatiable greed, he wouldn't have needed to commit fraud. Had he not strayed from his marriage, perhaps Tracy would still be alive. But the most haunting aspect is how an ordinary family in our tight-knit community was shattered from within. Investigating homicides, you unfortunately become inured to cruelty. Yet this one felt especially tragic to me. Tracy did everything right in life. She was hard-working, loving, and trusted her spouse fully. In return, she was met with deceit and a fatal abuse of that trust. This case also left me pondering the ripple effects of crime. An entire community was blindsided. Friends who had vacationed with the Carters, church members who looked up to them, clients who believed in Jason, all left feeling deceived and questioning their judgment of others. The emotional toll on Tracy's loved ones can never truly be measured. Her son, only in his early 20s, had to bury his mother and grapple with the knowledge that his stepfather orchestrated it all for money and lust. We investigators carry these stories with us long after the files are closed. I still sometimes drive by the now empty Carter house, recalling the early morning when I first walked through its rooms searching for answers. The ghost of what happened there lingers. In the end, some small good did bloom from the darkness. Tracy's friends founded a charitable scholarship in her name at the local high school, meant to support young women pursuing careers in finance and banking, a tribute to Tracy's generosity and ambition. The scholarship's motto reads, "Integrity first," a pointed reminder inspired by the very case that showed how dire the consequences of lost integrity can be. Each year at the awards ceremony, Tracy's story is quietly shared, with careful omission of the most painful details, to remind others how vital honesty and trust are in both personal and professional life. As for me, I've worked many cases since, but this one remains etched in my memory. It taught me that true crime is seldom a simple tale of good versus evil. It's often a tangle of human weaknesses, desperate choices, and unintended victims. I learned to look not just at the crime scene, but at the financial records, the relationships, the entire web of a suspect's life, to find the truth. And above all, I carry with me the image of Tracy's smiling face from a photo on her desk, determined that her voice, silenced in such a cruel way, will continue to be heard through the justice we fought for. Justice may have been served, but the echoes of Tracy Carter's story still linger in every corner of that quiet southern town. Her life, her trust, and her ambition were all betrayed by the person she loved most. Let her story be a warning. Some of the darkest crimes are committed behind the brightest smiles. Beneath the charm lies the motive.
Every story has an end, but here, the mysteries never stop. Thank you for watching and being a part of this journey into the unknown. Your support keeps these stories alive, and there's plenty more waiting for you. We drop 3 new stories every week, so if you crave suspense, the unexplained, and the downright chilling, make sure you're subscribed and ready for what's next. Until then, keep your lights on, your doors locked, and remember, some stories stay with you long after they're told.